I got money on my mind. I'm just trying to get some dough. I ain't picking up my line unless it's money on the phone.
I didn't know estate planning meant that, like, oh, I owe this. Now they're just taking my. I thought
like the estate sale.
Yeah, the estate sale.
That's
not the plan.
That's what the estate sale is. I owe the federal government. The IRS wants cash in 9 months.
See, I didn't know that that's what that meant. I thought that was just like the family just selling what was going on in the house.
I honestly thought it was more so like a probate court situation. I was like, okay, I didn't know it was because they owe money.
It depends. Some people are selling it because they're like, I don't want all this. My mom's all these old fur coats. Let's just make a garage sale, right? But there are some people who are selling assets in order to come up with their IRS bill or any bill, right? That's another thing. I always tell people about generational wealth. It's not just, do I have a beach house in the Hamptons to leave my son? Can you just not leave people with debt? Let's start there.
That's a fact.
Let's start. Debt is a huge hindrance. How many people can't do what they want to do because they got Sally Mae on them, or they got some other random debt on their shoulders? If I can say, okay, daughter, son, here's my house, and also here's a chunk of change to pay the mortgage, pay the property taxes, do this, do that, I'm really giving them a full gift, as opposed to, yeah, I'm sorry that I died. Expect a call from Macy's, because what happened was, like, can we just talk about not leaving people with debt?
And I think that's where life insurance plays a huge role.
Absolutely.
In all that. We talked about this with our brother Wes. Like, whenever you have these debts and all these things like this, you should be having a life insurance plan that's set up to take care of this whenever you're dying. Like, because everybody loves to make this a binary argument, like term versus permanent hold and all that. But you can have both. You can have anything, especially if you got assets to pass down.
Right.
Like, if you got a balance on your mortgage and God forbid, like you said, you die, now your kid's responsible for this mortgage, or your wife responsible for this mortgage, your income gone.
Right.
At the very least, you should have some insurance to cover that.
Totally agree.
Now we actually creating wealth. You're not just leaving people with debt.
Totally agree. Leave them with enough money to pay off the mortgage. Leave them with enough money to pay off whatever debts. Leave them with enough money to cover burial expenses. I feel like our community can get to the next level so quickly just by managing debt. We haven't even gotten into, oh, did you buy Tesla stock? And what about this? And did you, like, we can have that conversation too, but the strides we would make if we weren't leaving people with debt, and if we just had a basic will to say, let's keep the house and the family.
So
that's powerful.
Does life insurance kind of play a role in estate planning?
Absolutely. I talk about it all the time with my clients. Do you have the right amount? Do you own it personally? Should we put it inside of a trust, because there are benefits of doing that? I like to have, and I mentioned earlier, me starting out in the financial services industry gave me an opportunity to have my legal hat on and my financial hat on. So it's nothing for me to talk about investments, to talk about annuities, to talk about insurance products, because it's all part of the plan. Like, you should have your round table of advisors that touch on all of this stuff. Not just one magical person that does everything. That person doesn't exist. So you get your will, fantastic, thank you. But don't forget your insurance person, and don't forget your investment person, and don't forget your real estate person.
You need a team.
You need a team. Ain't nobody doing this by themselves. Yeah. Even that's you amazing. See me here physically with you, but 3 people behind me, possibly a 4th.
And they in New York. Getting things done what need to be done.
Exactly.
While she in Dallas.
Exactly. See how this works.
It's all connected.
You got to find the right team, though. So we all need an estate planning team to some degree. You don't have to do it all at once, but do something and be intentional about it. Wealth is very intentional. That's what I learned in my financial life background. The wealthy clients who were coming to me, they didn't just find it in the dumpster. It was very intentional. The way they grew it, the way they spoke about it, the way they passed it on to the next generation. So we have to be intentional as well.
I love that. I love that quote. I think that's going to be the name of your episode.
Wealth is intentional.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on the trust twice. You already know I got to ask, because, like, I'm interested. I know you said, if you're not super rich, you might not need this, but still, we might have some people who might need these trusts. So what's the benefit of having a trust versus a will?
Right. And to be clear, anybody can have a trust. You don't have to be wealthy. You might not need it for estate taxes, but you can do it for something else. So I'll use this analogy. When everybody was out in the streets, right, there will be crossing guards at the middle schools, the high schools. And the crossing guard is, the main purpose is, let's stop the traffic and let these students cross the street and get to the other side. That's the will. The will says, hold up, nobody go to the house and start taking stuff. We have a document, we have instructions. Let me get these assets to the other side. And we're done here. So the will is just making sure that your favorite car goes to your niece and not your nephew. It's making sure that your home goes to your spouse and not your ex-spouse, right? It's just, it's acting as a crossing guard to get your assets from one side of the street to the other. Once I get it over, once it gets over the street, it's done. The crossing guard doesn't follow the student to the classroom. They shouldn't, unless they're a creep, right? So that's the job of the will. It's just getting the assets to the other side, to the people that are supposed to be there. The trust is if you want to control and hold on to that asset for a longer period of time. You have long-term distribution goals for that particular asset. So, quick example, I want to give you $100,000. I could give it to you in a will. Say, here's $100,000.
And I could do whatever the hell I want with it.
You can do whatever you want with it. You could go build a house, or you could literally throw it in the fireplace, right? I don't have, the will can't tell you what to do with it. But if I want to control how you receive it, when you receive it, if I want to put conditions on it, then I need that trust, because then I can say, here's $100,000, but only $10,000 every year for 10 years.
Make it almost like
exactly. Here's $100,000, but only use it to start a business, or only use it to use as a down payment on your first home. So that's why I was saying generational wealth isn't just like, I've left you this big ass house. Maybe I can just leave you like seed money.
To get you started.
To get you started. So I can do that using a trust. So if you run into a situation where you have more long-term goals, you want property to stay in the family, like, hey, everybody, we can use this Brooklyn brownstone, but don't sell it. Keep it in the family. That's where you use the trust. So the trust allows you to hold assets and have more long-term distribution language, whereas the will is, here's your $100,000, we're done here. Because you want the will process, that probate process, to be as fast and quick as possible. Yeah.
So with trust are recognized as their own legal entities. Are they taxed differently than like people?
They are not taxed differently, but they're just taxed at the highest tax bracket. Once there's about $2,000 of income in there, it's all the way up at that 39 or 37% high bracket that it is right now.
Sheesh.
So it's taxed like an individual is just taxed like the wealthiest individual. Yeah.
So if you broke, there's not the best option if you ain't got a lot of money in there.
If you're keeping the money inside the trust, then if you're generating income, so let's say I have a rental property in there and it kicks off 5 G's every month. If I keep the 5 G's in the trust, then the trust has to pay the 37 or the 39% on the 5 G's. But if I tell the trust to distribute it to y'all and you're in the 25% tax bracket, then you pay the taxes. So you want to distribute it to the trust beneficiaries because they're more likely in a lower tax bracket. Versus keeping it inside the trust and having the trust paid at the higher tax bracket. It all depends upon what asset we're talking about, but that's the general rule.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, what you got?
I just want to go into like revocable versus irrevocable trust also, because I know there's two different types of them. So what's the difference with those two, and how would you apply each type?
Got it. You know, the best way to describe it is, firstly, there's a bunch of trusts, like all sorts of acronyms. There's a SLAT, there's a SPAT, there's an IDGIT, and they all, IDGIT, exactly. And they all either fall under the revocable umbrella or the irrevocable. And the main difference is irrevocable can't be changed, generally. Once you set it and forget it, it's done. You can't go back in there and say, oh, I need to change the beneficiaries. Oh, just let me hold a couple of dollars from there. Like, you have to set it and forget it. The reason people will do that is typically going to be those wealthy persons who owe estate taxes, right? Because here's the general rule. If you don't own it, they can't tax it.
That's that quote, own nothing,
control everything.
Yes, exactly. If you don't own it, they can't tax it. So if, let's say this is $1 million and the IRS was like, ooh, we see Lillie's $1 million. We can't wait till she dies because then we'll tax that at 40%, right?
Sheesh.
If I put this into a trust, then I can say you can't.
I don't got that. Ain't mine.
That's like putting in your mom's name. That
But
ain't mine.
they can still tax it at the 39%, right?
No.
Because then you distribute to the beneficiaries?
Yeah, because it depends on what's in here. So that's a great question. If my $1 million is invested in the trust and it's earning income, then yes, they're taxing the income.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not taxing the $1 million that I put in there because it had already been taxed when I owned it, right?
Okay, I got you. So it can't, I got you.
Okay. So with the irrevocable, I'm going to do that because this is, you mentioned earlier about it being a separate entity. This trust is its own separate tax entity. So we'll actually use the cup as the example and then like the tea in there as my assets. This is its own holding company. It has its own tax ID number and everything. So whatever I put in here and I put the lid on it, it no longer belongs to me. Why would I do that? I'm going to do that because I owe estate taxes and I want to start putting money in here. Why would I do that? I might get sued one day. Like gynecologists have high lawsuit rates. So I might want to put assets in there so that I'm not sued. There's all sorts of reasons why I would want to protect what's in this trust. The irrevocable means I do it, I put a lid on it, and I can't go in there anymore. I would only really recommend that for someone who's really concerned about creditors, or if they're concerned about divorce, or if they are concerned about estate taxes. They're wealthy enough to owe estate taxes, then we can start talking about the irrevocable trust. Other than that, you can use a revocable trust, which accomplishes the same thing, except it's not a separate entity from you. The IRS still looks at you as if you still own what's inside that revocable trust.
Got you. Okay, so I always was wondering what the difference was. And the revocable trust, you can always go in and change it.
Yes, and you can always make changes.
So what happens to revocable trust after someone dies?
Then it becomes irrevocable.
Right.
Okay.
Because you've died now and you can't make changes to it. Only you who created it can make changes. So just some terminology. The person who creates the trust is a grantor. Whomever you name to follow the instructions, that's your trustee. And whoever benefits from the trust is the beneficiary. So grantor, trustee, beneficiary. Once the grantor passes away and it's a revocable trust, then it becomes irrevocable. It's locked. There's nothing to do. All the trustee has to do at that point is just follow the instructions that are in there.
So I have another question. What happens if the trustee dies?
You should have a backup trustee.
Okay.
I always ask my clients to name a successor. Some of them name one backup, some of them name two backups. Especially if you're an older client and all your family, your friends are older, you all might start passing away around the same time. So try to look for a younger trustee because statistically speaking, they should outlive you and they'll be there even after you pass away.
And this is the way that some of the old money, like the Rockefellers and the Waltons, were able to pass down their wealth.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like well beyond.
Yes.
There's the Waltons.
Walmart's in a trust, right?
Yeah, they use these documents. There's a book. Don't quote me on it. It's something about like what would the Rockefellers do? Insurance. They use life insurance. There's a requirement that these Rockefellers purchase life insurance and put it inside the trust.
Wow. You can put your insurance policy in the trust,
yes,
like as the trust can be the beneficiary of your insurance policy.
Wow. That's a whole different game.
That's a whole different game. It's not uncommon for a client to say, okay, I got this $1 million policy. I want to leave it to my granddaughter, but I don't want to get her $1 million. Can we put it inside of a trust with all of these instructions on how it's to be paid to her? Absolutely. Absolutely. I have clients that will get together and say, the life insurance premium on grandma is pretty high. Can we all pitch in for the premium and buy a policy on her? And then when that policy is paid, that's what we use to fund everyone's college. That's what we use to start our new family adventure, whatever the case may be. So people are using life insurance like it's candy. It's the fastest way to multiply your dollar. I put in $1 and the life insurance company gives my daughter $20.
Why not?
Why wouldn't I do that?
That's easy.
And I guess so. Like, I guess I'm thinking with it. Like, so life insurance policies sometimes don't pay out, but I guess that's for those people who end up lapsing on it.
Yes, I have never seen a policy not paid as long as the premiums were being kept up. And there's so many different types of products, and each carrier has their own spin on a product to a certain extent. So you have to be careful about the specific asset that you're purchasing. But as a general rule, if I'm paying you the premiums every year, every month, whatever the contract says, and I pass away, there is absolutely no reason, unless I engaged in fraud, there is absolutely no reason why the carrier should not pay that out to my beneficiary.
And I kind of want to go a little bit more with like the trust, and like you were talking about putting the assets in it. That's called funding the trust,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
And like, unless you have those assets within that trust, it's pretty much null and void. Like, it doesn't even matter what you. So like, let's say you got the trust set up, and you might have a home, and you might say, okay, whenever I die, I want this home to stay within the family. Yeah. If that's not within the trust, does it still?
Great question. So you want to change the ownership of that asset and put it into the name of the trust, because yes, you're right. You can have a trust that's not funded. So then you just have an expensive piece of paper.
Damn.
You need to take active steps.
Intentional.
Exactly, because wealth is intentional. You have to start putting assets inside the trust. Certain things can just be named as the beneficiary. Like, for instance, life insurance. Do I have to change ownership and put it in the trust? I don't have to. I could just say the beneficiary, instead of it saying David, it says the Lillie Nkenchor Family Trust, dated, February 20th, 1925, right? Then it will go in there. But for other certain assets like real property, you'll want to put it in the name of the trust. Put the asset in the name of the trust.
Can you do that with stocks too?
I was going to say stocks and like retirement accounts as well.
I wouldn't do retirement accounts because retirement accounts are pre-tax dollars. And when you change ownership, all of the gain is taxed at once.
Okay.
Remember, when I put money into my 401k, I haven't paid taxes on any of those dollars. It's just been investing and growing for the past 30 years. When I start to take distributions, that's when I start paying taxes. But if for some reason I have this 401k and then I randomly change ownership to you or to my trust, then all the gain that's been sitting there
gets hit with that
right then and there.
So it's just the gain and not your contributions, right?
The whole thing, because these are all pre-tax contributions into these qualified plans.
What if it was used like a Roth though, like where it's
Yeah, so the Roth, the Roth IRA is funded with after-tax dollars, and it's growing tax deferred, and then when I access it, it's tax-free. So that's a good safe bet. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't know who I was talking to. I was saying something about like taxes is the biggest impediment to your wealth.
Hey, a lot of people think, oh, I'm just paying taxes when I go to the store and all of that. No, they are hitting you over the head with these taxes,
everywhere. If every single dollar you own will eventually be taxed, you're not 40%. Going to create wealth the way that you want to. You have to have some vehicle that will not be subject to tax. Maybe it's the Roth IRA, maybe it's a muni bond, maybe it's a certain type of insurance product. But what in your portfolio is free from taxes? That's how people are keeping their wealth. They have something that is not going to be taxed.
I got money on my mind. I'm just trying to get some dough. I ain't picking up my line unless it's money on the phone.